we still have...
I see it on screen here, but yeah, so thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you're revived by a coffee shop, and now we'll move away from the airy-fairy world of letter writing and titles to real history, magic carpets and war and other things. I'd like to introduce Professor Alexander Osipian for the Leibniz Institute in Leipzig, and also I think of Harvard University, who will give us his paper on trade, international trade links from the Italians on the Black Sea to Lithuania and Western Europe.
Yes, thank you so much. Many thanks to Darius Baronas for the invitation and for this chance to share my research with so many distinguished colleagues. So I hope to contribute to this conference with my research on Armenian diaspora. So, as you know, Armenia for centuries was a neighbor of Byzantine Empire, and the western part of Armenia was a province of the Byzantine Empire. So relationships between two cultures and nations were rather not friendly. So today I will try to focus my research how Armenians performed as mediators between the Middle East and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and the Kingdom of Poland. So this paper starts with an analysis of Armenian migration to Eastern Europe. Then it highlights how the long-distance trade was operated by Armenian merchant network. Thereafter, it explores the attitudes to Armenian heresy by the Greek Orthodox Church in Eastern Europe. Finally, it demonstrates the variety of diplomatic services provided by Armenian merchants. So, as you know, the Mongol conquest of the steppe lands of the Cumans, Deshti Kipchak, and the foundation of the Golden Horde contributed to the better conditions of the long-distance international trade between East and West. So travel from the Mediterranean to Yuan China became possible, and many Italian merchants and merchants of other backgrounds, they did it successfully. Mongol rulers protected the foreign merchants in their domains and established a wide network of relay stations known as YAM. Some Armenians, mainly merchants and some artisans, settled along Volga River and in Sarai, the capital city of the Golden Horde. Armenian bishop of Sarai was mentioned in 1320s, and there were at least 2 Armenian churches in the city. Another direction of Armenian migration was the northern coast of the Black Sea, particularly the Crimean Peninsula. It was facilitated by the establishment of network of the Genoese and Venetian trade colonies in the Black Sea region. Through Kaffa, Tana, and Sarai, the Italian merchants operated on the Silk Road. Earlier, in 13th century, Italian merchants did their trade through Cilician Armenia in Eastern Mediterranean. In late 13th century, the Armenian king of Cilicia, Levon II, granted Genoese merchants the privilege to establish their fondaco, a guest house in city of Mamistria. In the 14th century, Kaffa, the biggest hub of Oriental trade and administrative center of Genoese network, became the main center of Armenian diaspora in the region. The earliest book of notarial records of Kaffa from late 13th century mentions numerous Armenians and their deals with Genoese and Greeks. For instance, one case of such deal, the Armenian Christophana, an inhabitant of Kaffa, in 1290 credited John of Syria with a big sum of money. The latter was obliged to return the credit in 1.5 years. So one can speculate that probably John took his goods to Syria and then back to Crimea to pay his debts and to make new bargains and commercial deals. There were mixed partnerships of 2 to 10 Armenian and Greek merchants who rented Genoese ships to transport crops, salt, and other merchandise from Kaffa to Trebizond. So as you see, despite all these religious contradictions between Catholic, Greek Orthodox, and Armenian churches, merchants, they always able to find common ground to make profit. So here you see my reconstruction of circulation of goods in this wider Black Sea and Eastern Mediterranean region at that time, with Oriental goods, mainly silk textiles coming initially from China, then from 15th century from Persia through the Black Sea, Crimea, and then to Western Europe, and to say East European goods like crops, wax, furs, timber, skin, salt, fish, caviar, and slaves coming from lands of present-day Ukraine and south of Russia and Moldavia and Hungary, through the Black Sea as far as to Egypt, Cyprus, and to Italy. And so why this map is important? Because many Armenian merchants were engaged in these commercial endeavors. Initially, in Genoese and Venetian colonies, Armenians were treated only as inhabitants, so without civil rights. Because of religious difference, term Christians in the medieval Latin sources was reserved only for the Roman Catholics, while Oriental Christians were treated as Armenians, Greeks, and Syrians. In 1341, in accordance with the Genoese regulation of Gazaria, so the Genoese name for Crimean Peninsula, every consul, together with the aldermen, could grant the burghers status, so the next status to the natives, like Armenians, Greeks, and Syrians, living in the respective Genoese colony and paying taxes. Finally, only a few Armenian merchants were granted the highest status, the rights of full citizenship, known as civis. According to the Genoese reglement of Kaffa in 1316, there were 3 Armenian churches in the city. 6 Armenian churches built in the 14th and early 15th century survived until our day in Kaffa, in Feodosia. And in 17th century, there were 24 Armenian churches in the city. Armenian bishops of Kaffa and Solkhat, present-day Stary Krim, were mentioned in Latin sources in 1320s. So in the Crimea, there were so many Armenians that Armenian parishes were divided by 2 bishoprics, in Kaffa and in Stary Krim. So the distance between 2 cities is just 20 kilometers or 25. The inland city of Solkhat or Stary Krim, was administrative center of the Golden Horde domains in the Crimean Peninsula and is situated at a distance about 25 kilometers from Kaffa. And in vicinity of Stary Krim, there is Armenian monastery of the Holy Cross, consecrated in 1358, and as you see from this image, it's well preserved, with many frescoes and bas-reliefs inside. In the late medieval Crimea, besides the monophysite Armenians, believers of the Armenian Apostolic Church, there were also Armeno-Catholics, thanks to the missionary work of Dominicans and Franciscans, and so-called Chalcedonite Armenians, believers of the Greek Orthodox Church. In Armenian sources, such Armenians were defined as Tsates or Hai Chorom, which means Armeno-Romei or Armeno-Greeks, when Tsates could be translated as semi-Greek, semi-Armenian. So on this map, I reconstructed 3 waves of Armenian migration from proper Armenia through the Black Sea in the late 13th century to the Crimean Peninsula. You see this Kaffa, Sudak, and Solkhat, Stary Krim. And then in the second half, in the first half of 14th century, mainly for commercial purposes, these Armenian merchants migrated and settled in Tana in the estuary of Don, Moncastro in the estuary of Dniester River, and in Kilia, Lykostomo in the Danube Delta, because these rivers, they were used as main arteries of international trade at that time. Finally, in time of the civil wars in the Golden Horde in the second half of 14th century, some Armenians migrated from Crimea, which was in the epicenter of these conflicts. Some of them migrated as far as to the Mediterranean, to the islands of Kos and Kritos, while others migrated to the present-day western Ukraine and eastern part of Romania and settled there and survived until the early 20th century. So in this table, based on my analysis of Genoese notarial records, I was lucky to trace some, to say, very short biographies of some Armenian merchants. For instance, if you will take a look on the first position, this Cristofano Erminius, habitator de Kaffa, sive de Surcati de Laizo. So Laizo or Laiazzo in Italian, Laias or Ayas, in Cilicia, in Eastern Mediterranean. So this person, he probably originated from Laiazzo, from Mediterranean, and then he settled in Kaffa or Sorkat, this Stary Krim, which is 20 kilometers. Probably he operated in both Genoesian Kaffa and Golden Horde city of Sorkat, and maybe he had his business and houses in both places, and he was mentioned in 1920s. And the same with other persons like Koja Amir de Tefelix. Probably he originated from Tiflis and then he settled in Kaffa, but he did his trade in Kilia in the Danube Delta, and he mentioned that year by the Genoese Notario. So I found 6 such cases. And then in this table I was able to reconstruct mobility of Armenian merchants in the second half of 14th century, how they moved from Crimea to the western Ukraine, like Jacobus Filius of Shachinshah, Nicolae Kafensis. So he originated from Kaffa, but in 1363 he donated church built by his money to Armenian community of Lembergo, Lviv. And so probably he himself planned to settle in Lviv because of the civil war in the Golden Horde. It was more safe to move his business to Lviv. And the same with some other merchants. The main migration flow was to the lands of southern Rus, because some Armenians also settled in Kiev and Principality of Moldavia. In 1364, Lviv became center of the Armenian diocese of Rus and Moldavia, and Armenian bishopric of Lviv existed till the Second World War. In the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, Armenian communities existed in the cities of Kamenets-Podilsky, Lutsk, Volodymyr, and Kiev. Merchants transported from the Crimea to Rus oriental goods delivered through the Silk Road. For instance, the wheel of Armenian merchant drawn up in Lviv in 1376 specified the goods he had in Lviv. So mainly it's spices, but also pearls, Arabic horses, and raw silk. So 100 years later, we see almost the same goods declared by Armenian merchant Lucas to the custom office in Lviv: silk, pepper, calamus, and 2 carpets. Both silk and spices were used by the municipal authorities of Lviv to honor the visiting dignitaries, including the king himself. For instance, the city council of Lviv received 4 rolls of silk from Armenian Asvadur to honor the king Vladislav Yageilo and queen Anna. Because Armenian merchants mainly traded with luxury goods, it helped them to establish confidential relations with ruling elites, who in turn protected Armenians from intolerance and possible persecution. As a Monophysite Christians, the Armenians were considered heretics by both the Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox churches. In the late Byzantine Empire, the Armenian heresy was condemned and classified as one of the most dangerous forms of heresy. This highly inimical attitude towards Armenians spread within the countries of the post-Byzantine circle in Muscovy, Moldavia, and Wallachia. And luckily, Grand Duchy of Lithuania was rather exceptional in this case, so Armenians were welcomed there. Just one example, for instance, the Armenian church in the diaspora had neither landed property nor serfs. The only property the Armenian Archbishopric of Lviv owned was the village of Tseporeve in Volhynia, and this village was donated to the Armenian church by Švitrigaila, the Grand Duke of Lithuania, in 15th century, and was in the church possession until the last partition of Poland. Then Catherine II gifted this village to her Hungarian favorite, Count of Széchenyi. Merchants ordinarily circulated political news as well. It helped them to establish confidential relations with rulers and get some commercial preferences and privileges. For instance, in 1426, Armenian Ovanis of Kaffa wrote a letter to Vytautas, the Grand Duke of Lithuania, informing him on the arrival of Devlet-Birdi Khan to the city of Solkhat in Crimea, and Han's intention to be in good relations with Vytautas. So I found one such letter, which is, in my view, great success for 15th century, but probably there were much more letters and maybe oral messages in the same time. Armenians were fluent in Kuman or Kipchak or as it now called Tatar language, used as a lingua franca in the Golden Horde. Because of the widespread Armenian network and language skills, Armenians frequently provided the rulers of Eastern Europe with diplomatic services. For instance, Armenians of Kiev, which was until the mid-16th century in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, Armenians of Kiev and Kiev land were employed by the Grand Dukes of Lithuania as interpreters from Tatar and diplomatic couriers going to the Horde, mainly to the Crimean Khanate. For instance, in 1500, someone, Berendei Armenian, courier of the Grand Duke of Alexander, arrived to Mangligirei Khan with letters. Next year, the same Berendei again arrived to Mangligirei. This time Berendei brought with him the credential letter and instruction he got from Alexander. Berendei handed the letter to the Khan and delivered his speech in accordance with the instruction. Then Berendei negotiated peace with the Khan. So he was not just a courier, so he was authorized to negotiate with Khan and conduct peace. The same year, Berendei got permission to go back to Lithuania, so probably to Kiev. Mangligirei sent his courier Ekibash along with Berendei. The Khan asked Alexander, Grand Duke Alexander, for sending Lithuanian ambassador and issued letter for his safe conduct to the Crimean Khanate. Therefore, Berendei not only delivered the letters, but was also entrusted to negotiate with the Khan, accompany the Tatar courier to Lithuania, and arrange future visit of Lithuanian ambassador to Crimea. Another person of this kind, another case, the Tatar courier Ekibash came back to the Khan accompanied by another Lithuanian courier, Sultan, an Armenian of Kiev. Then, next time, Sultan was sent to the Khan in order to arrange visit of the Lithuanian Grand Ambassador, Prince Dmitry Putyatich, a voivode of Kiev. Once again, this year, Sultan was mentioned as interpreter, whose mission was to inform the Khan on the expected arrival of the Lithuanian Grand Ambassador. So, as you see, this courier, in that case of Armenian background, made at least 3 trips from Kiev to Crimea in order to arrange one visit of Lithuanian Grand Ambassador. So all this technical work was done by these interpreters and couriers, many of whom were of Armenian origin. In other case, an interpreter, Makar, is mentioned in the sources in early 16th century as a courier of the Grand Duke to the Khan. In 1516, the king, Sigismund, granted a manor in a village Likhovshizna to his interpreter from Tatar language, Makar Ivashkovich, an Armenian of Kiev, for his loyal services. He was frequently sent to the Horde in behalf of the monarch and state. The manor was exempted from any taxes and services, so actually those Armenian interpreters and couriers, they were ennobled and obliged to conduct this Zemska service. And just last example about first Polish embassy, which was sent to the Ottoman Sultan in 1414. It was led by 2 royal envoys, Jakub Skarbek of Gura and Gregory the Armenian. Gregory was a resident of the city of Lviv, where he served as a sworn municipal interpreter. Both envoys successfully accomplished their mission to the Sultan, and an adnamer was drafted issuing a 6-year peace between Mehmed Çelebi and King Sigismund of Hungary, who asked Polish King Władysław Jagiello to mediate between the two powers. In the next 3 centuries, Polish kings frequently employed Armenian merchants for the diplomatic missions to the Ottoman sultans, Shahs of Iran, and Tatar Khan of Crimea. Thank you.
Thank you very much for an extremely interesting paper which shows not only trade in goods but how Armenian merchants developed into Lithuanian and Polish diplomats. Talking of diplomats, I'd now like to invite Professor Darius Baronas of the Lithuanian Institute of History to talk about the Lithuanian move south to the Black Sea, presumably via the same Kaffa.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. So without further ado, I would like to admit that some topics that I am going to cover will be overlapping with what we have heard in this in today's presentations made by Jonathan Shepard, by my Janina Ryer, but I would like to ask you not to treat this as a predicament of some sort, but a cross-fertilization, because the truth is that we have to deal with much the same sources when we work in the same field. So without further ado, I would like to start my report by drawing your attention to a most idiosyncratic picture I have ever seen. The Chronicle of Eberhard Windiger contains an illustration depicting the troops of the Lithuanian Grand Duke Švitrigaila taking part in a naval battle against the Ottomans. Švitrigaila was a regular troublemaker to his predecessor, Grand Duke Vytautas, but once, at long last, he came to enjoy supreme power, he proved to be one of most inept Lithuanian rulers ever, and was toppled in a coup d'etat after sitting on the throne for less than just 2 short years. Another slide represents the picture of the Mother of God placed in the high altar of the Trakai parish church, a church that was founded by Grand Duke Vytautas. This painting can by no means be dated to the time of Vytautas. Art historians suppose that it was produced in the late 15th, early 16th century. It is curious that its reverse side bears an inscription telling us that this is the very icon that the Byzantine Emperor Manuel II Palaiologos gave in gift to Grand Duke Vytautas on occasion of his conversion to the Christian faith. This inscription was made slightly before 1718 and is of too late a date to give us a safe link to a diplomatic mission known from more contemporary sources. However, one must note that neither the location, Trakai, nor the persons referred to are misplaced. To some degree, the same holds true with regard to Švitrigaila's troops. It is an impressive example of wishful thinking, even if spurious. There must have been some forces at play accountable for its production, and this is what I want to uncover. At first, however, some background information. The first historical instance in Lithuano-Byzantine relations dates back to the mid-13th century. It was the time of the reign of the first and last medieval Latin Christian king of Lithuania, Mindaugas. He had a son called Vaishulka, who in contrast to his father was an Orthodox believer and even a monk. In his aspiration to attain the heights of spiritual life, he attempted to travel to the holy Mount Athos, but couldn't reach this point of destination. Having returned home, he established a monastery on the bank of the Nemunas River between the land of Novgorod and Lithuania. His personality and this monastery convey 2 important messages. First, the lands of present-day Belarus and Ukraine played a crucial role in mediating between the world of Byzantium and Lithuania. Secondly, this princely endowment served as a focal point for those Lithuanian ruling elite members who adopted the Greek Orthodox faith and formed, naturally, milieu that was receptive to the things and ideas emanating from Byzantium. Another chapter in the history of Byzantino-Lithuanian relations is turned when we deal with the Lithuanian Greek Orthodox Metropolitanate. It was established in about 1317 and, no doubt, represents one of the most curious topics in Byzantino-Lithuanian relations. There are different views as to when and why this metropolitanate was established. In my view, it shouldn't be ruled out of hand that this establishment was made on the initiative of Constantinople, and I slightly disagree with Zuckerman. I allow this luxury, I'm sorry, but simply I would like to stress that it depends a little bit from our point of view. If you see on this issue from a church historical perspective, so to say, the right is on the side of Zuckerman. But if you see from a lower perspective, and I infer that from the reasons why this metropolitanate was suppressed, I may infer that it could be established on the initiative of Constantinopolitan authorities that envisage this foundation as a bridgehead for the dissemination of the Orthodox faith among the pagan Lithuanians. Be that as it may, one thing is certain: by the first decades of the 14th century, Lithuania was rapidly becoming a regional power, a process admirably described by Stephen Rowell in his Lithuania Ascending. Lithuania's expansion over the lands of Rus provided this country with a relatively high relief on the international East European stage. Lithuania's rise to prominence induced at least some Byzantines to try to figure out what good could be gained for the salvage operation of their tottering empire. The most outspoken, if not most enthusiastic person in this regard was none other than the prominent polymath Nikephoros Gregoras. It was his belief that if only the Lithuanian demands over the metropolitancy of Kiev were met, the course of history would have changed so dramatically that even the Ottoman threat to the empire could have been done away once and for all. In Gregoras' view, Lithuania's extraordinary military power could be tapped for the benefit of empire if only Lithuania, a pagan Rus, in his eyes, could be brought into the fold of what Dmitry Obolensky has termed the Byzantine Commonwealth. It is likely that the cult of the three martyrs of Vilnius, Orthodox Saints Anthony, John, and Eustathius, provides yet another example of the hopes on the part of Byzantine ecclesiastical and secular authorities to see one day a Lithuanian people becoming members of the Greek Orthodox oikumene. By and large, such hopes were dashed once Lithuania's ruler, Jogaila, was baptized into the Roman Catholic Church in 1386 and converted most of Lithuanian pagans to Latin Christianity in 1387. Reflecting on this change, Dmitry Obolensky observed that Lithuania was united with the Polish kingdom, and although it included a large Russian Orthodox population within its borders, moved outside the orbit of Byzantium. Really? Did something resembling the Iron Curtain descend between Byzantium and the Ruthenian lands of the Grand Duchy once its Lithuanian heartland embraced Roman Christianity? Of course not. It was, I think, the logic of writing a book that Sir Obolensky omitted the discussion of Lithuania's relationship to Byzantium in its post-conversion period. And generally speaking, the same applies to Father John Meindorf's book Byzantium and the Rise of Russia. Thus, on the whole, we do not have a popular and reliable account in English or in any other widely diffused Western European language that could be said to cover the topic of Lithuano-Byzantine relations after 1387. I hope that we are stepping over this magic circle right now, today, thanks to Jonathan and to other participants in this conference. This report may thus be viewed as a small step in this direction. Broadly speaking, as long as Lithuania remained formally a pagan country, the issue of a metropolitan see constituted the only viable avenue for contacts between Lithuania and Byzantium. With the conversion of Lithuania, this channel remained open, but in addition, two more fields opened up in the interface between Lithuania and Byzantium. First, that of church union, and secondly, that of the crusading movement. So instead of talking of Lithuania's falling out of the Byzantine orbit, we should rather try and speak of the emergence of new modalities in the interaction between Lithuania and Byzantium. It is possible to view them in a light similar to that cast over Rus in Simon Franklin and Jonathan Shepard's book, The Emergence of Rus. There was, to cite Franklin and Shepard's book, rather a rise and a rise, a continual growth and expansion, if we dismiss a Kievocentric schema, as they put it. If not so dramatic in our case, there was certainly an increase and intensification in contacts after Lithuania's conversion to Roman Christianity. For the sake of clarity, I will proceed on a topic-based approach. However, one should be reminded that in real life, different facets were intertwined, much like in our own days. The Patriarchate of Constantinople and Lithuania. There was no abrupt breakup in the relations between Byzantium and Lithuania in post-conversion era. It's evident that, if one takes as a thread the cult of the three martyrs of Vilnius, the particles of their relics were first brought to Hagia Sophia in 1374. Afterwards, the international dimension of their cult set off. It is known that in 1376, Patriarch Philutes Kokinos sent out some of their particles included in the pectoral cross to northeastern Russia, and their recipient was none other than Saint Sergej of Ramunė. The news about the Lithuanian martyrs were to emphasize the fact that orthodoxy was alive and well not only in Moscow-controlled areas, but across the whole extension of the Metropolitanate of Kiev and all Rus. The protective qualities of the relics of the Lithuanian martyrs were recalled once again by Michael Baltzamon in his encomium that was composed during the siege of Constantinople by Sultan Bayezid. The most dramatic evidence of the cult of the Lithuanian martyrs in the milieu of the metropolitans of Kiev and all Rus is supplied by the most famous major sarcos of Metropolitan Photius. On it, the three martyrs are embroidered between the royal families of Byzantium and Moscow. Many years ago, Father John Mendorf has observed that such an iconographic program was a statement of the universalist approach of the Patriarchate of Constantinople to its pastoral mission. By placing Lithuanian and Muscovite orthodoxy on essentially the equal footing, the Sarcos of Photius was to serve as an antidote to temptations to make the church serve for Muscovite political ends. Something more to this can be added by stressing the Lithuanian side of the story. The major Sarcos was made at the time when Metropolitan Photius was having problems with Grand Duke Vytautas and the Orthodox Episcopate of Western Rus. The bishops accused Photius of neglecting and pillaging the Orthodox Church in Western Rus. They declared then him removed from office and elected Gregory Zamblak in his stead. Set in this context, the Sarcos of Photius sends a message that he contradicts such accusations and treats both parts of the Metropolitanate of Kiev, each with due respect. Another topic in short. The issue of church union and King Jogaila and Grand Duke Vytautas. As long as Lithuania remained formally pagan, her rulers couldn't bring anything worthwhile to the internal squabbles among the Christians. The situation in this, as in many other respects, changed with the conversion of Lithuania. What is important to note here, albeit in passing, is that Polish and Lithuanian rulers, Jogaila and Vytautas, represented an approach that at the time was rather unusual in the Roman Catholic world. They subscribed to a view that the rift in the church could be healed by convening a general council of the church, an idea that they came to espouse thanks to their open-minded interaction with the churchmen of the Greek Orthodox Church. And in this regard, even if in minority, they were not alone. Such a view, in principle, was shared by none other than King Sigismund of Hungary. And now I go over to the topic of crusades and how, Lithuanian footprint came to be established on the northern shores of the Black Sea. The crusading movement as a topic. In my view, it makes sense to define three different periods marked out by the increased intensity in Lithuano-Byzantine contacts within the context of crusading activities. The first period extends over the Crusade of Nicopolis and partly overlaps with the siege of Constantinople by Bayezid. The Byzantines were then eager to obtain aid from wherever they could. In January 1397, Patriarch Antony of Constantinople advised King Jogaila to form an alliance with the Hungarian King Sigismund, and in July of the same year, the Treaty of Iglo, Spišska Nova, was concluded between Jogaila and Vytautas on the one hand and King Sigismund on the other. The Gediminids promised to help Sigismund conquer the Turk. Lithuanian polity was not a charity organization, and its troops didn't rush headlong to save Constantinople or to aid Hungary. Rather, Vytautas mounted his first expeditions to the Black Sea region in 1397 and 1398. They proved very successful. The Lithuanian presence in the region was made good by the construction of the castle of St. John in the lower reaches of the Dnieper River. All this elan was cut abruptly short in a most cruel fashion when a crusading host suffered a devastating defeat on the banks of the Vorskla River, 1399. All that is general textbook knowledge, to be sure, but I would like to stress one point. The late 14th century Lithuanian raids to the steppes marked the beginning of a very close involvement of Lithuanian rulers in the world of the Tatars. First and foremost, it was Vytautas who was proud of demonstrating far and wide his ability to lord over the Tatars. This capacity couldn't be lost on the Byzantines, who regarded the Tatars as the descendants of the Scythians that inherited much the same warlike qualities as their ancient predecessors had. A new chapter in Byzantine-Lithuanian relations opened up in the post-Tannenberg era, when both Poland and Lithuania enjoyed the pinnacle of their power and international prestige. Not so long ago, Sebastian Kolditz demonstrated that the tripartite alliance between Hungary, Byzantium, and Poland-Lithuania started to form already in 1411. I think it is not a simple coincidence that in 1411 the decision was made to have Princess Anna, the daughter of Vasily of Moscow, and Sophia, daughter of Vytautas, given over in marriage to the Byzantine heir presumptive John Paleologus, where follows a series of events that I would like to recall only in passing. A shipload of grain sent by Jogaila to Constantinople in 1415, Metropolitan Gregory Zamlang giving a speech in favor of church union at the Council of Constance, and finally the map of Constantinople by Cristoforo Buondelmonte. Some 20 years ago, Professor Giuseppe Ragone collected evidence showing that the original of this map, called Membrana Maxima, was sent to Vytautas most probably in 1420. By all accounts, it was an extraordinary artifact. The problems related to its production are notoriously difficult to tackle in spite of much high-quality research done on this issue to date. To cut to the chase, I would like to support an opinion advanced by Professor Giuseppe Ragone that postulates that it is highly probable that this map was brought to Lithuania in summer 1420 by Byzantine embassy headed by Manuel Philanthropenos. This view may be reinforced by focusing our attention on circumstantial and collateral evidence. For one, it should be noted that Manuel Philanthropenos is the only Byzantine envoy known by name in the Ruthenian chronicles of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Thus, his embassy must have been quite an impressive and memorable one. On the other hand, it is worthwhile to note that according to Polish historian Professor Marek Derewicz, it was most likely that the embassy of Manuel Philanthropenos brought to King Jogaila the relic of the True Cross in the same year, 1420, and this relic in time came to form part of a Polish royal coronation outfit. The extraordinary relic and the extraordinary map would form a fitting pair of precious gifts to be lavished upon two most illustrious rulers, Jogaila and Vytautas. The embassy of Manuel Philanthropenos on its way to Poland and Lithuania crossed Hungary, and it is one of the indications, I think, that King Sigismund also had a hand in what followed quite soon. The map of Constantinople was meant to incentivize Vytautas in the right direction, and lo and behold, next year, when Gilbert de Lannoy, a Flemish knight, traveler, and diplomat, was heading south through the lands of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, he witnessed quite a remarkable event. He saw how a Lithuanian stronghold was built on the orders of Vytautas at the mouth of the Dniester River. It was Chernigrad, located on the left bank of the river, opposite to a much better known Ackermann. It represented yet another step in strengthening the Lithuanian presence on the Black Sea coast. Another step in the same direction and a sustained effort at creating a new political reality came about in the last years of the reign of Vytautas. In February 1427, Vytautas went most literally out of his way and arrived on the Black Sea coast. While on the seaside, you can do many things. What did Vytautas do at the mouth of the Dniester River? He went fishing. It was not, however, a simple pastime of throwing and pulling the line. Vytautas was going about capturing big game, the sturgeon of the Black Sea, where he reenacted something similar to what King Sigismund had done on the Vlach River in 1412. After a successful fishing, Vytautas took care to have a batch of sturgeon sent all the way to Marienburg. On occasion, Vytautas informed the Grand Master of the Teutonic Order, Paul von Rusdorf, that going straight south from his land, one arrives in Constantinople. You may ask a number of questions. Why did Vytautas, by then an old man in his 70s, need to travel in person all the way to the Black Sea coast and go fishing there? Then there was a much simpler alternative to all that at hand. He could simply order the sturgeon be brought to his or his friend's table. Why did Vytautas find it opportune to speak of Constantinople to the Grand Master of the Teutonic Order? Did he want to say that he had already studied the map and knew the exact location of Byzantine capital? All such and similar questions begin to yield their answers once we come to realize that when the Teutonic Knights were alleviating their fast time restrictions by consuming sturgeon sent them by Vytautas, a messenger arrived, bearing a letter from King Sigismund. The Hungarian king was inviting them in no uncertain terms, the Teutonic Knights, to come and settle on the banks of the Danube River in the Banate of Severin. It was the right place where the Teutonic Knights could have ample opportunities to live up most faithfully to their true vocation of fighting the infidel. By sending sturgeon, by telling the Teutonic Knights about the easy way of reaching Constantinople, Vytautas was doing much the same, urging the Teutonic Knights to come and join in a common cause in the Black Sea region. That Vytautas was serious about his intentions on the Black Sea coast becomes evident from his information supplied to the Teutonic Knights that he ordered the castles be built between the Dniester and Dnieper rivers. It is known that at long last, in 1429, a detachment of the Teutonic Knights and their servicemen arrived and tried to settle down on the banks of the Danube. Their mission didn't prove a success, but at that time nobody could predict that with the death of Vytautas in 1430, the best days of Lithuanian power and international prestige would be over and gone forever. Even if the potential of the Teutonic Lithuanian neighborhood in the Black Sea region was not realized, it is important to emphasize that for some time the tripartite alliance between Hungary, the Teutonic Order, and Lithuania was taking shape. In the last years of his life, Vytautas was receiving extraordinary favors from King Sigismund. In 1429, Vytautas was offered the royal crown of King of Lithuania. In the same year, Vytautas and his wife Juliana were granted membership in the Order of the Dragon. Finally, in 1430, the last year of Vytautas' life on this earth, when King Sigismund was preparing for his travel to Italy, Vytautas was entrusted with a role of protector over Hungary and Bohemia and the Teutonic Order itself. And now I would like to go over to the last chapter of my report, the Italian traces, Tracce Italiane, so to speak. This topic deserves attention here because, in my view, the Italians were instrumental in making possible much of interaction that went between Byzantium and Lithuania. Even though the state of the preservation of relevant sources will never allow us to attempt something akin to thick description, nevertheless, something may be said by simply putting a question of how something was made possible. Take, for example, a shipload of grain that King Jogaila sent to Constantinople in 1415. To the best of my knowledge, nobody has asked who was responsible for the transportation of this shipload to Constantinople. My guess is that it was the Italians, most likely the Genoese, who were in control of the ports in the northwestern part of the Black Sea coast. For some time, for example, I have been wondering of who was to be thanked for a rather swift dispatch of the sad news of the death of Princess Anna to the Lithuanian court. This mystery becomes less obscure once we come to see that when Joseph Brenius was delivering a funeral oration in memory of Anna, the Italians, both the Genoese and the Venetians, were present at this solemn event. Randomly survived evidence yields indication that it was nothing special for Vytautas to correspond with Franciscans based in Kaffa in the Crimea and through the mediation of Armenians, as we have heard in the presentation delivered by Alexander Osipian. The Genoese based in Ackermann must have assisted Vytautas in capturing the sturgeon in February 1427. Some Italians seem to have been unusually well informed about things related to Lithuania. Take, for example, the campaign of Golubats. Some Hungarian and Romanian historians postulated the Lithuanian presence in the failed attempt of King Sigismund to dislodge the Turks from this stronghold in 1428. However, to the best of my knowledge, the evidence deriving from the Chronica Morosini has not received due attention so far. But it is this source that speaks of Lithuania in clear words as having been involved in the campaign along with Hungarians, Germans, and Bosnians. In sum, much of the traffic between Lithuania and Byzantium and between Hungary and Lithuania was made possible thanks to the Italian mediation. Discovery of the Italians in this capacity prompts me to formulate some more general conclusions. The Lithuanian presence on the Black Sea coast was a welcome development in the eyes of the Byzantines, of the Hungarians, of the Italians, and of the Teutonic Knights. The same insight may be extended to Western crusading enthusiasts, especially those who thought that it was a commendable idea to plan an expedition to Constantinople and even to the Holy Land itself by passing through the Lithuanian-controlled lands. The same rings true to the Lithuanians themselves. It certainly may sound a bit paradoxical to us moderns, but it seems that for the Lithuanian ruling elite, the Black Sea was of a much bigger concern than was the case with the Baltic Sea. The Black Sea had much more to offer. It offered a relatively easy access to Constantinople, a place where a bookman from the entourage of Bishop Gerasim of Smolensk was taking inspiration for the praise of Vytautas in the last years of the life of this ruler. This praise brings forward the tenets of triumphal rulership and, in the case of Lithuania, provides an especially valuable piece of evidence attesting the demand for and the attraction of Byzantine soft power in the final decades of the empire. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very interesting paper showing how Lithuania's relations with Central Europe influenced its ambitions on the Black Sea and in Constantinople. Now, perhaps there are questions for both for Darius and for Professor Osipian. Yes. If you.
Thank you. This might seem like a small question for Alexander, but perhaps it opens up a larger discussion. I was just struck by the designation of Armenians as the most dangerous heretics at a time when surely the Catholics, to our eyes, seem the most dangerous. I was wondering if you could expand on why they were considered so particularly dangerous at that time when, they had been around for quite a long time, and were they more dangerous at this time than in the past 1,000 years, or what was going on there?
Sorry, do you mean why Armenians? Do you mean why Armenians were considered as so dangerous by the Greek Orthodox Church?
Right, and more dangerous than, say, Roman Catholics.
So I'm not sure. So because I'm not an expert in ecclesiastical history, so I'm mainly interested in merchants and trade. So dangerous. So Armenian heresy was considered by Byzantine clergymen and then later by Moldavian, Wallachian, and Russian. More dangerous, maybe in a sense as more dangerous, because Armenians were insiders living in Byzantine Empire, but at the same time they were outsiders by their religion. So, and for this reason they could not be trusted. So at the same time, probably many of them were fluent in Greek and dressed as Greeks, but at the same time different. When in case of Latins, Franks, they were living mainly far away, except of this Genoese colony in Pera, and so they were dangerous in other ways than Armenians. Actually, Armenians were prohibited to settle in Russia till the 18th century. So only Peter I and then Catherine II, they granted permission to Armenians to settle in Russia. So they did their trade in Russia for centuries, but they were prohibited to buy real estate and to settle there for a long time. And in Moldavia there were quite many Armenians starting from 14th century, and they were well respected by Moldavian rulers. Nevertheless, in the mid-16th century there were a series of persecution of Armenians in Moldavia for religious reasons, but in my view mainly for political reasons as well, because these Armenian merchants, they were diplomatic envoys and spies acting on behalf of Polish kings and some Moldavian boyars who tried to overthrow Moldavian ruler. And so Armenians, with their financial, commercial and linguistic resources and political ties everywhere, they were too dangerous to this small country of Moldavia, and so they were persecuted until late 16th century, when consensus was found between Moldavia and Poland and the Ottoman Empire. So the persecution of Armenians stopped, and they lived in Moldavia for centuries. So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, just a remark for Darius, who to explain my position on the origins of the Lithuanian Metropolitan See. That is, I think you apply to, in your reasoning, when you speak about the Byzantine initiative in establishing the see, you apply the Western pattern of missionary see. This pattern is entirely strange to Byzantium. It's totally strange to Byzantium. I would like to advertise the book of my friend Sergey Ivanov, Pearls Before Swine, in which he dwells on this major distinction between East and Western attitude towards mission. And Byzantines accepted request. There was not a single case when they actually sought proactively to convert someone. So I think that's not our Byzantine way of doing the church affairs. That's just to justify my position.
Thank you.
If no questions, I have a question to Darius. Thank you for your fascinating talk, particularly the last part. For me, it's absolute revelation how you connected all these events in 1420s with Gilbert de Lannoy, with this Armenian of Kaffa sending letter to Vytautas, and this map and all these plans. So it's amazing. So my question, so when, in what season Vytautas came to Dnipro estuary for fishing sturgeon? Is it somewhere in the sources you examined?
Yes, I reconstructed that he must have been in the estuary of the Dniester River in February 1422, because I rely on the summary of the letter that is not preserved in full, but it is dated to 1427 March 2. So I assume that he must have taken more or less 1 month for going and returning, so to say. It must be most likely in the February of that year. And it was also a good season to catch sturgeon, so to say. It's not exactly the month most suitable for catching sturgeon, but it was a good time for catching, as we can infer from the results of this fishing.
Yes, thank you, because I became curious if you ever consulted some biologist. So is it a good season for fishing sturgeon in the Black Sea, or it was, I'm not expert in medieval German, so it could be like some proverbial expression or some metaphor, for instance, like fishing sturgeon.
No,
like making a big deal or starting big business, which is in accordance with your excellent reconstruction of all these plans to expand Lithuanian presence in the Black Sea region.
Yeah, I think that it was an extraordinary event, because usually it was good to send one sturgeon, and it was deemed to be a good royal present to high-placed persons. On the other hand, I think that as 10 großen Fischen, they are called Schaurian in this piece of evidence. And I have consulted, for example, Werner Paravicini, and he assured me that German lexicographical sources do not have anything similar to that. Then I started to think what could be the basis of this strange word, Schaurian, and I came most I came to believe that it must have been the origin of Sturione. And when the transcription made in the second half of the 16th century was, because the transcriber, he didn't understand quite well the realities of it. He didn't even recognize Dnieper, the rapper, he thought. So I think that he simply put transcribed Sturione that was not understandable for him, and he gave such a mysterious word, but I think that it is derivative from the Italian language. On the other hand, it is so that I think that Sturgeon was like a bait for the Teutonic Order Knights to come and to catch, do it yourself. And Vidas, in my opinion, wanted to show that he could do such extraordinary things to catch big game, and he let the Teutonic Knights to understand. So if you are invited to go to the Danube, which was also a river rich in sturgeon, you could do the same, and you will have also economic opportunities to develop. And I think that it was, so to say, a message conveyed in a very, very specific and very inventive fashion.
Yeah, thank you. So excellent.
Are there any more questions?
Thank you. A very short question to Darius concerning the position of Vytautas as someone who could help Sigismund during his travel to Rome to keep his country, so to say, in order. What's the source, the actual source for this? Because it seemed to me that it's just a regestum or something like that. Or is it a letter completely preserved?
I can. So if I can have my presentation back on the screen, I can show. It is. Let's wait for IT persons doing their job very fine. Thank you for them very much indeed. And you can see that I gave a short extraction of the same letter. It was transcribed. It is a very important and very interesting manuscript that is preserved in Lithuania. And even though a number of German and Polish scholars were excavating this wonderful manuscript, it is still possessing many valuable things. And I simply have described, and you can see, so to say, if you can close Sigismundus Imperator Anno, it is rather strange, but we have no doubt to think that it was a fake news, because this, as far as I could establish, so to say, this piece of evidence have never been brought into scientific circulation, and when you put such disparate evidence, pieces of evidence side by side, you see that how seriously they were thinking about new developments, about new departures. But everything was cut short. It is not counterfactual history, but something that was in the process, but this process was not given further traction and was cut short. But due to the circumstances that no one could have predicted at the time. And this I could talk to you a little bit about this manuscript, because I found there the catching of sturgeon. I came across this evidence, and there are even some more. To just one thing, I remember that, for example, I found in this manuscript the third oldest word in Lithuanian, because it was in 1409 when the uprising of Samogitians was beginning to take place. And it seems to me that the commander of the Ragnit castle, the Neman, on the lower Nemunas river, was reporting back to Königsberg or to Marienburg about the developments, and he, for example, decried that the Lithuanians came and they stole Karves und Pferde. Karves, it's coup. And so he used the Lithuanian word. It's extraordinary, because I register 3 oldest words that are, so to say, conveyed in the chronicles related somehow to the Teutonic Order. So it's amazing, because Lithuanians themselves, they didn't write. But for persons, for example, in the Germans, so to say, where it was usual to correspond in literary forms of communication, they simply even even they were able to convey some words in Lithuanian, not only the names, not only the location, but even such a word, the karas, who was a very, very important thing in the economy, in the economic life of Lithuanians. So this manuscript also contains is very interesting. I can say that now it is under reparation works because its state of preservation is very bad. But I try to do my best to alert the persons in the library of the Wróblewskis that it is very important and it may yield very, very interesting facts about the relations between Teutonic Order and Lithuania, and even, as you could see, stretching out as far as Constantinople. Thank you.
I have one question for Darius and one question for Alexander. Thank you both for the wonderful papers. Darius, about the fish, because I think we are struck by the fish. I wanted to ask you if you think it relates also to this image of a ruler hunting. It's like you are in the middle of the winter, you cannot hunt as far as I know, so they turn to the fishing as a replacement. Could you connect to that? And if you have taken into consideration the environmental conditions, the climate at this time, if there were frozen areas in the river or in the Black Sea, if you, I don't know exactly, but we are already in the 14th century moving to the Little Ice Age, and perhaps it played also a role to this, perhaps it's of interest for your analysis. And
I made recently a paper that is given over to publication. It is 30 pages strong, and I tried to deal with every aspect possible regarding that capturing of sturgeon. It is in Lithuanian, but I will be using some material in English and maybe in other internationally widely known languages. But you see, of course, for me in this letter, it is interesting that Vytautas was eager to show himself as organizing this event. He wanted to radiate power, to show that he is on the Black Sea coast and he could perform such deeds. Big game is related to big people, and it is very interesting. So I came across that in general the history of fishing is not well covered in historiography at all. And during my extensive correspondence, because this topic for me is quite new, I have been carrying out an extensive correspondence with various scholars. And for me, I would like to say many thanks to Joachim Achim from Halle University, who produced some articles related just to the image of a ruler as a fisherman. So it was, and he reconstructed in great detail that fishing on the Vlach River in today's Slovakia, that was when in Hungary, and you could imagine that it was a very spectacular event. And I think that Vytautas couldn't do this for themselves even in winter, so to say. That is why I suppose that some help from outside, most likely from Ackermann, was coming to his aid. And he described how this fish that was being captured in the Vlach River. It was so that, for example, some people were sent upstream, some 8 kilometers or something like that, and they were making the most possible noise by singing, by shouting, by banging, and all the rest to frighten that fish, and that sturgeon went in droves to the estuary of the Vlach River into Danube, where we being waited by noble guests, and der Husenfang viel Lustes hat. It was an amazing event. I do not think that it was such a fun thing to do in February on the Dniester, but I think that some cooperation, large-scale operation, could have been in place. Of course, we have this one piece of evidence, and it indicates that Vytautas in person was present on the Black Sea coast, and it is very precious in that. But I think that still I have to explore many more things, because his presence was quite close to the presence of Sigismund at the time in Transylvania. And when you see sources, so to say, we have to deal with shreds because there was also some turmoil caused in the Tatar world. In this time, in the first half of 1427, for example, he welcomed quite a lot of Tatars coming to his service. So to say, I think that the obscure origins of the Khanate of Crimea is that Hadzhigirei, and I think that the first, so to say, first moves in the direction of creating, it is my working hypothesis, was made when Vytautas was on the Black Sea coast, and it is known that Hadzhigirei, the first Khan, was raised in Lithuania, and it seems to me that these events were quite significant, even though we have very small evidence, and this, so to say, that has survived by pure accident. It survived from Königsberg, survived all the bombing, all the neglect caused by the Russians in their newly occupied Kaliningrad district, and so on. It's amazing that we still have such a short but quite an informative piece of evidence related directly to the presence of Lithuanians on the Black Sea coast, and Vytautas personally. That's what I want to show, and I think that this catching of fish must have been extraordinary because Germans have two words, Stör and Husen, for sturgeon. But in this, so to say, Vytautas in general had no difficulties to correspond with Teutonic order because he had scribes fluent in Mittelhochdeutsch, Mittelniederdeutsch, and so forth. But in this event, so to say, they didn't recognize fish, and I think that they simply transcribed what was told by impressed Lithuanians when they caught, I think, something like that, because they were sent these big fish, not in part, as some others were given over to the commanders. It was not only to Marienburg, because Vytautas also asked to send parts of that capture of sturgeon also to the highest ranking Teutonic Knights officers. To Grossspittler, to Marshal, and so on and so forth. It was quite an impressive demonstration of power. And so to say, I do not want to consume all the time because it would be worth another report, but I would like to show that it was as a presentation. And I think that in general terms, when Professor Zuckerman was right that he said that this Nikon Chronicle is a very tricky one because it is infused with 17th century Russian imperial propaganda and so on. So, what is that such sources they orientate our orientation when we deal with Lithuanian causes into Russian lands, into the lands of Rus in the eastern direction. But when you see what was going on the Black Sea coast, I am inclined to put these directions of Lithuanian expansion on a par. So to say, I think that at least for now, so to say, that they were in equal importance as far as expansion to Rus was concerned, and also the expansion on the Black Sea coast. Even though with Lithuanians, I think it's another case that, so to say, Lithuanians were not expanding for grabbing land at all cost, because he delineated Vytautas, for example, that their coast is that between the Dniester and Dnieper, and it remained so for more than 100 years. So to say, they didn't want to venture on Moldavia, on the lands to the lower Danube, and also they didn't come on the left bank of the Dnieper River. They were satisfied that they had access, and I think that Lithuanians are a land-bound people, so they didn't have any claims to become a sea power, and that is why I think that for Italians they were not, so to say, rivals. So Italians would like to see them bringing goods for trade and something like on, but there was no, I guess, any chance that Lithuanians could themselves would be starting having their fleet, seafaring fleet and something like that. They were a land-bound people. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one or two questions for Alexander. Thank you so much. It was enlightening for me to see that you have Armenians being interpreters and making, they are the connecting dots in this area because they had the language skills. Do you know if they were also active in the Venetian colonies in the Black Sea? Armenian merchants? And another question is if they were, the Armenians in the Black Sea, if they knew also Greek, and they could translate also in case of emergency or regularly Greek.
Thank you.
Greek.
If Armenians were fluent in Greek language, no, I don't know. I found no evidence. But in case of Venetian, yes, Armenians, there was Armenian community in Tana, this Venetian colony on the estuary of Don, and there was Armenian church already in the 14th century. So that's I know for sure. And there were also Armenians in Cyprus, which was under Genoese and Venetian, some other islands in archipelago under Venetian control, so they were Armenians as well. And in Venice itself, I remember that in late 13th century, one influential Venetian stateholder, he established a sort of guest house for Armenians coming to Venice.
And were they described as inhabitants or as Burgenses or what in the Venetians?
In this case, I don't know, so maybe they were just merchants coming for some time to do their trade, but in general there was this hierarchy in Genoese and Venetian colonies, habitatores, burgenses, and cives. So most of Armenians, pretty merchants and artisans, they were in habitatores. Wealthy merchants were burgenses. They got access to some offices of magistrate in local self-government, and only few, the wealthiest Armenian merchants, they got this status of cives, so full citizenship.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Are there any questions for any of today's papers?
Well, I don't have a question, but I do have an observation, which is that it's a kind of coincidence that of the scholars and the works which have been mentioned today in our proceedings, the works which have been mentioned most often, and indeed we saw a picture of the book, Lithuania Ascending, up on the screen a few minutes ago, is by none other than our moderator. So I would firstly like to congratulate our moderator upon being the most frequently mentioned scholar today. And this isn't a complete coincidence, because when I was in Vilnius last year, 2023, there was an exhibition celebrating the anniversary of what would it be, the period from 1323 to 2023, that's 700 years, the 700th anniversary of the first mention of the city of Vilnius in a written text, in a charter, giving privileges. There, the name Vilnius is written quite clearly, and quite rightly, the charter occupied pride of place in the exhibition in the middle, together with the new-ish editio princeps of the charters, which was edited by our moderator here. So this charter is held as a national treasure, quite rightly by the Lithuanians, and in a certain, and there it was standing in a glass case in the old library in the university, and well, in a certain way, I think it would be true to say that S.C. Rowell is himself a kind of national treasure of the Lithuanians, happily not quite under a glass case by the look of things, and so. Yeah, well, you never know. It may happen yet. But when I saw that, and when I see him moderating today, I feel a certain pleasure because it takes me back over 30 years to a time when Stephen was writing his PhD thesis in Cambridge, which became the book Lithuania Ascending. And I very well remember the rigor, the academic rigor, determination, and the sharp insights which characterized his approach to research and which bore fruit in his book, Lithuania Ascending. So it's a great pleasure to see this, and that reminds me of another anniversary, which I think has been recently celebrated, or so Professor Baronas, who put me up to this, I have to say, and I blame you for this. Don't shoot me. I'm only playing the piano, as it were, on this. But I understand that this month has seen the 60th anniversary. So last year was the 700th anniversary of the city of Vilnius. This year, this month, in fact, is the 60th anniversary of Stephen Rowell. So perhaps you would join with me in applauding our moderator for becoming an almost national treasure.
Before you find out the truth.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are not done with anniversaries and other, I would say, celebratory announcement. And this time I would invite the other scholar who was very frequently in today's conference, Jonathan. Please come. This is not a cake. Despite the careful wrapping, this is not a cake. But I think... no, wait, we will make some place and you can unwrap it in more or less this direction. Careful, yeah. Yes, my wife likes very much wrapping, so the wrapping, yes. It comes out, it comes out, it comes out. This is more than a project. This is more than a project. This is more than a project. This is a preprint. This is a preprint. Unfortunately, that's not the final version of the volume. This is a preprint of studies dedicated to Jonathan Shepard by, I would say, the barbarian part of his crowd. That is, this volume doesn't pretend in the least to embrace the fullness of his scientific interests and achievement. It was conceived, I think, in the city of Kiev, and I don't dare to say 5 years ago, by Fedor Androshuk and myself and Alexei Tolochka, the people present. And this was a barbarian tribute to his barbarian interests. Therefore, this does not embrace all Byzantine history, but rather the relations of Byzantium with its various neighbors and friends and enemies. So this is a volume that is not finished. It will be printed later this year. And this gives me the occasion, on the one hand, to ask for Jonathan's collaboration, because with all the work on his bibliography, it's probably either incomplete or too complete, and you never know what suits the author. That's one advantage of this not being finished. My other duty is, of course, to present my excuses for the length of the project, because it was conceived early in 2019. As I said, it was started 5 years ago, and then it dragged because of COVID, and then it dragged because of my health failures and for other unworthy reasons. Not everybody who intended to participated because of this outstanding duration. But still, I think that that's a representative sample of contribution of Jonathan's friends and admirers from Russia, from Ukraine, from France, but only on barbarian subjects. You'll see what a great new seal Vivien Préjean found, and well, there are also other contributions. And as the guilty party who didn't finish it entirely in 5 years, pass the mic to other speakers. I think Marek volunteers to say a few words, and then.
Well, Constantin asked me to say a few words of laudation for Jonathan, and I have never done this, so this is a completely new experience for me. The title says Poimen kai didaskalos. And it's difficult in 5 minutes to do justice to this title. We all know the boundless erudition of Jonathan. We know his breadth of horizons, his versatility. Jonathan is at home in Byzantium, in Rus, in Scandinavia, in Western Europe, in the Islamic world, in the steppe, and we've seen today in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania indeed as well. The sheer novelty of his conclusions. But when I was wondering what makes Jonathan such a captivating reading, I realized that I haven't really thought before about his use of language. His sentences are not short, they can be long and complicated, but they are extremely structured and logical, and they constantly play with language. They constantly have several layers. And I wanted to illustrate this richness of puns and wordplay in Jonathan's writing by one specific case, namely that of Jonathan's titles. I think we all admire the titles that Jonathan gives to his papers. This one is very simple: hard on heretics, light on Latins. You see the alliteration HHLL. This is certainly not a coincidence. This one, unfortunately, you can't read very clearly, but this is the title of the conference that we co-organized in Oxford in 2016, Lost in Translation, ? Ibn Fadlan and the Great Unwashed. 8 years after the conference, I still don't know what the Great Unwashed is, but I will ask Jonathan during the break.
Well, your copy of this publication will be soon in the post. We sent it to Warsaw, but clearly something has gone wrong. But we can talk about that later.
Okay, thank you. But it's above all the tripartite structure of his titles. So we've seen this today. Soft power, manpower, center points, or Holy Land, Lost Lands, Realpolitik, or information, disinformation, and delay. So we quite often see synthesis, antithesis, synthesis, as here, missions, emissions, and empire, even though Jonathan, a couple of years before this article, hesitated a little bit, and titled his paper Emissions, Not Missions, but then he evolved to include missions as well. Or this one, slightly more complex, Man to Man, Dog Eat Dog, Cults in Common. That's one of the most fabulous titles in Byzantine studies, I think. Silks, Skills, and Opportunities. And of course, I have to mention Silver, Slaves, and Gotland. So I just wanted to very briefly follow this tripartite scheme and say a couple of words about my relationship with Jonathan. And the reason why I'm doing this is that I'm sure that many of you will recognize yourselves in my experience with Jonathan. So 3 stages to continue the tripartite structure. Durham's for Slaves project, 2013-2017 in Oxford, that Jonathan agreed to join, that Jonathan made what it actually then was. And I must say that we've been paying Jonathan for 10% of his time, while he was spending quite literally 100% of his time on this project. So I am a debtor of Jonathan also in a very financial sense. I remember our weekly, monthly discussions in Café Rouge, that doesn't exist anymore, but I learned from Jonathan how to supervise a doctoral student. We had a brilliant student, Jacek Gruszczyński, who is the co-editor of this volume, and by looking how Jonathan was guiding him towards a very brilliant dissertation, I have learned a lot. But perhaps above all, I learned how to, well, Oxford is a strange place, as many of you may know. And by observing Jonathan, by observing my mentors, Mark Whittle and James Howard Johnston, I learned, even if insufficiently, how to imitate the local behaviors and how to survive in this environment. Then the post-Durham's for Slaves years, 2017-21, where the main experience was co-editing this volume with Jonathan. And this was an admirable privilege to see in practice the organization, the structure, the diligence, the precision of Jonathan, but at the same time, his patience and generosity, lack of hurry when hurry was not needed, but also pressure on the authors when this was needed. So this was an immense privilege to do this with you, Jonathan. And then the last 2-3 years, which meant fewer contacts due to dark machinations, but this is an occasion to offer, well, my own humble contribution to this volume, but I guess of all of us, as an assurance of our respect, and I think I speak for all of us, as a mark of our affection for Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan.
Well, thank you very much. And I think it will be best of all if I'm speechless, because we've already exceeded our time. So,
oh, no, I think Monica will say a few
oh, no.
words. Would you? Yeah. I asked Darius' authorization, so we are okay. We're not holding.
Well,
you have the mic, so.
It seems to be my fate to end proceedings on both days, so I won't try anyone's patience. I'll just, I don't even have any slides. I'll just make a quick observation that, you know, I knew about the Great Unwashed project, but to me, 2016 was the year of Byzantium in the Viking world, which was the volume we co-edited with Fedir, and I never would have known that you had anything else going on, because, you know, you seem to spend all your time. So I fear you may actually have a stunt double, given your, you know, ability to be in 17 places at once. All I want to say is that I think I speak for a lot of people here and those online when I say a big part of the reason I am here today is because of you. And I don't mean literally here in Vilnius, although that's also true. But I mean it's because when in 1998, the same year that I first visited Vilnius, I washed up in Cambridge with an idea about doing a PhD and absolutely no clue and no idea of the British system, no idea about anything. I probably sent a random email, and Jonathan very kindly took me in and sat me down and gave me a lot of his time, and then proceeded to stay in touch over a year or two before I actually made it to Cambridge. And then has always, even though I was not supervised directly by Jonathan, he continued to take an interest and has just been so generous with help and advice and hospitality at every turn. And I think, I know I'm not the only one who's benefited from all that, so I think we all owe you a great debt.
Well, can I just grab the mic one more time to make 3 sort of points? So, one is that, no, I don't have a doppelganger to account for this. I have a wife. And it's actually my wife, Nicola Sigsworth Shepard, who did a great deal of the groundwork in this editorial work. So I would very much like, are you listening, Nicola? Probably not, because I don't think this is being televised. But I'm deeply grateful to my wife for her many, many editorial skills. My second observation is that actually I can beat the record of this apparent festschrift, which is that actually my editing of a kind of festschrift from my old teacher, Dmitry Obolensky, is now 6 years, going on 7 years overdue. So I suppose there's a certain aptness that actually I am paying more tribute, as it were, to my old teacher than apparently you very kindly, although not mostly my pupils, you are paying in the production of this work. And my final observation is that I'm still not 100% confident that the object on that table is really what people say it is. This is no disrespect to Professor Zuckerman, no respect to Professor White or any of the other kind people who have commented so far. I think I will hesitate to open it and actually inquire within, but we can't rule out the possibility, in a scholarly way, of my original reaction when I thought it might be a box of chocolates, and when I was told it wasn't a box of chocolates, I thought it might be a bomb. So, on that note, thank you very much.
Next time we'll bring chocolates.
Oh, my goodness.
So, my impression is that we have labored quite for a while, and I think that we are about to finalize and to finish our today's conference. We are waiting for all the participants, and of course all looking on us and participating online in this conference for tomorrow, 9 o'clock in the morning. And now thank you for your attendance, for your being together with us. So to say, it's very fine to find yourself in the company of like-minded people with the like interests in the things that are very difficult but very fascinating to learn about. And I think that this conference is going to be a success. And I invite all the participants to go to the for the festive dinner at the restaurant I will indicate, and we are due to be where at 7 p.m. So to say, we have quite a good time to go there. And all participants, all speakers, or moderators are invited to stay a little while together. Thank you so much. Today's sessions are over.